Greetings, everybody. Just thought I'd provide a video response instead of an email response. Also, I was worried if I did the response in VoiceThread, some of you might not see it. So this is unscripted, just thinking about your comments in the VoiceThread. First, there was a general agreement that the second video felt more positive, and those of you who commented on both of them, in particular, talked about how the second one felt more positive, and perhaps it was not just more positive but more productive, because for those who did comment on that second video, which is on slide 3, the comments you made were how the LA really tried to hold back and not speak much, and as a result of using the principles and the guidelines of effective dialogue, that student had the aha moment, which a few of you said she will never forget, and I agree, but also others got more involved. So it really does show how effective it can be. For those who responded to the video, the first video, which was entitled One Student Dominating, and one of you said, I wish it wasn't called that. I actually agree, because it wasn't just about that student. It was about the interaction. And it was interesting to hear and watch and read your comments on that. I think everyone can agree that it wasn't a very productive dialogue. And when I say dialogue, I really mean that when there's a dialogue, it involves more than one person. Regardless of how the male student responded, I think it's important to note that there was a back and forth that was not very productive and inclusive and acknowledging of where each person might be at. There were a few recommendations made. I think that somebody talked about taking turns, and then there was another comment about how it might have been helpful for the students who were not necessarily speaking to say, I'd actually like to hear from some other people in the group. I want to make sure everyone has an opportunity. And I think those are very practical concerns. I think what's important is to not attribute intent to the way people were interacting, but rather focus on the interaction itself. So it could have been, a few of you talked about somebody being overconfident. It could have been that somebody was trying to dominate the process, but we don't know that. It also could be that when we believe we know the answer, to allow ourselves to open up to other possibilities means that we might feel a bit more uneasy and a bit shaky in our own confidence in that concept or even that whole area or that whole course. So I think really the critical takeaway from there is that had there been an LA standing there or sitting with a group, it may have been an opportunity to intervene in a gentle way to ask those open-ended questions and draw some other students in and normalize that there are different perspectives, and to try to have each person share what that perspective might be. Now, on to slide 4, in terms of the successes and challenges. I think that, first of all, the successes you had were really inspiring, and I thank all of you for sharing those successes. It sounds like you're doing some tremendous work, and seeing the difference that you make, and also seeing the difference that it makes to have students working actively together in the classroom each week. I think the biggest challenge, the common challenge, was when you have a student who is not engaged, a student who says they want to work on their own. And what I would offer there is that as LAs, your role is to help create an environment in which students who want to participate can participate, to try to draw them in, to help facilitate, but ultimately, you're not responsible for the learning. The student is responsible for their learning. I think that for each of you, it'll be important to check in with your faculty, since for some, there are faculty that you're in a class where there are faculty that have more stringent expectations that a student come sit with the group. For others, it's, well, some students will work alone and that's up to them, and And for other faculty, it might be somewhere in between. So I think it's important to have that conversation. But at the same time, I also think it's important that you don't allow your role to devolve into helping students one-on-one. That is not what the LA model is. It is not about working with individual students. So I think that you could say the happy medium, and I believe we talked about this in course prior, is that that if a student chooses to sit on their own, you can ask any of them, say, anytime that you'd like to get some feedback from me or double check your own thought process, feel free to come join a group, but to not go over and work with the individual student. And that's just a reality that you are not going to have time. There aren't enough of you, and there isn't enough time in each of these classes to go from student to student. If a student is choosing to work alone, that is up to them, but it's also very appropriate for you to reach out to them and personally invite them to join a group, whether that be in class or in between classes. A few of you said it was a student who sat alone who did the most poorly. Frankly, that's what I've heard from a number of faculty over the past year or so with the LA model. Occasionally, is there a student who says, I've got it, and I'm on top of it, and I don't want the group work to interfere with my success? Is there a student who might think that? Yes. Is there a student who might actually be experiencing that? They're doing fine on their own? Yes. Is that aligned with the most effective learning practices? No. Is it more often that the student just doesn't want to work in groups, and many of you said you really don't like working in groups? That can be part of it. But for many, they're assuming that the group experience will be something different than it really is. And so I really do encourage you to find ways to create an environment when you're going from group to group to make sure that each person is offering their thoughts, where they are in their process, normalizing struggle, and modeling that learning can be tough, but at the same time, it is that challenge that makes learning happen. And it's not about getting the answer. It is about working through the process and having some awareness of the process. And one of the best ways to do that is to try to explain it to others. And I know we keep going back there, but that is one of the most common, I think, components to successful learning. So I think that, again, be careful and mindful about making attributes of why a person's sitting alone, why they're being quiet, why they might be assertive in a group, and just ask yourself, how is this impacting the overall learning process? How can I ask questions in a way that's going to draw other people in, and that's going to keep people open to ongoing dialogue around this? So again, you're responsible for helping to create a conducive learning environment. You are not ultimately responsible for whether an individual student chooses to engage. So again, I think you all did a great job collectively with the conversations this week in the voice thread, and I'm hoping that all of you are watching this. I will put out there that I recognize that one of the times that we have scheduled to meet in person is Halloween. I don't know if folks have plans or had hoped to have plans Halloween, whether that's being part of a community event, going off and doing your own thing, going with a younger sibling or to trick or treat, whatever it is. But I recognize that I am willing to make another switch of weeks if people thought that it would be better to have flexibility the week of Halloween. So we'll see how many of you actually watch this video when I bring it up in class. Anyway, great work. I hope this video was helpful in terms of reflecting upon everything that you brought to the process last week.